The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training ground as Sarah Martinez carefully cleaned her rifle for the third time that day. Her hands moved with practiced precision, every motion deliberate and quiet. Around her, the noise of the barracks filled the air with loud conversations, laughter, and the clatter of equipment. But Sarah remained in her own world, focused entirely on her weapon. Sarah had always been different from the other soldiers in her unit. While they boasted about their weekend adventures and complained about the tough training, she preferred to listen and observe. Her quiet nature had earned her the nickname Ghost among her fellow trainees, though not everyone meant it kindly. She had grown up in a small town in Texas, where her father had taught her to shoot when she was just 12 years old. What started as weekend hunting trips had turned into something much more serious when Sarah discovered she had a natural gift for marksmanship. Her father, a retired Marine, had recognized her talent immediately and encouraged her to pursue military service. Now, 3 months into her advanced sniper training program, Sarah had proven herself to be one of the most accurate shooters in her class. Her instructors were impressed, but her fellow trainees were not always supportive. Some resented her quiet confidence, while others questioned whether she had what it took to handle the pressure of real combat situations. On this particular morning, the trainees were preparing for their most challenging test yet. They would be evaluated on a series of long-distance shots under various weather conditions, with moving targets and time constraints. The exercise was designed to simulate real battlefield scenarios, and failure meant being removed from the program. As Sarah continued her weapon maintenance, she could feel eyes watching her. Sergeant Williams, their tough but fair instructor, had been observing the trainees more closely than usual. He understood the pressure they were under and knew that some of them were struggling with self-doubt. "Martinez," Sergeant Williams called out as he approached her station. "You ready for today's exercise?" Sarah looked up from her rifle and nodded. "Yes, Sergeant. Ready as I'll ever be." "Good. Remember what we've practiced. Control your breathing, trust your training, and don't let anyone else get in your head." His words carried a weight that Sarah understood. He had seen the tension building among the trainees and wanted to prepare her for what might come. The training facility was located in the desert mountains of Arizona, where the wind patterns and elevation changes created challenging shooting conditions. The targets were positioned at distances ranging from 800 to 1,200 yards, requiring precise calculations for wind speed, temperature, and bullet drop. As the trainees gathered their equipment and moved toward the firing positions, Sarah noticed Marcus Thompson, one of the most vocal members of their group. Marcus came from a military family with 3 generations of service, and he never let anyone forget it. He had been struggling with the long-distance shots lately, and his frustration was beginning to show. The first part of the exercise involved stationary targets at various distances. Each trainee would have 5 shots to hit 3 different targets, with points awarded based on accuracy and time. Sarah took her position and began her pre-shot routine, checking wind conditions and adjusting her scope. Her first shot rang out across the desert, followed by the spotter's confirmation of a direct hit. The second and third shots followed with similar success. As she prepared for her 4th shot, she could hear murmurs from the other trainees who had finished their rounds. Some were celebrating good shots, while others were clearly disappointed with their performance. Marcus had finished his round and was not happy with his results. 2 of his 5 shots had missed the target completely, and the other 3 were barely within the acceptable range. As he watched Sarah continue her careful shooting process, his frustration began to boil over. "Some people just get lucky," he muttered to his friend Jake, loud enough for others to hear. "Wait until we get to the real challenges. That's when you find out who can actually handle the pressure." Sarah heard the comment but chose to ignore it, focusing instead on her final shot. The target was at the maximum distance, and the wind had picked up slightly. She took a deep breath, made a small adjustment to her scope, and squeezed the trigger. Another direct hit. The second part of the exercise involved moving targets, which would test their ability to track and predict movement while maintaining accuracy. This was where many trainees struggled, as it required split-second timing and advanced calculation skills. Sarah positioned herself for the moving target exercise, noting the wind direction and speed. The targets would move across her field of view at different speeds and distances, and she would have only one shot at each target. There would be no second chances. The first target appeared, moving from left to right at a steady pace. Sarah tracked it smoothly, led the target appropriately, and fired. Hit. The second target moved faster and changed direction slightly. Another hit. By the time she reached the final moving target, a crowd of trainees and instructors had gathered to watch. This last target was the most challenging yet, moving in an unpredictable pattern at maximum distance. Sarah took her time, studying the movement pattern and calculating the best moment to take her shot. When she finally fired, there was a moment of silence before the spotter confirmed another direct hit. The gathered trainees erupted in a mix of cheers and muttered comments. Some genuinely congratulated Sarah on her performance, while others seemed less enthusiastic about her success. Marcus was among the latter group, his face showing clear signs of frustration and jealousy. As the morning exercises concluded, the trainees were given a brief break before the afternoon's final challenge. Sarah found a quiet spot away from the group to eat her lunch and review her notes from the morning. She was pleased with her performance but knew that the real test was still to come. The afternoon exercise would be the most demanding of all, involving multiple targets at extreme distances under simulated combat stress. Instructors would use various distraction techniques, including loud noises, smoke, and time pressure, to replicate the chaos of actual battlefield conditions. During the break, Sarah overheard conversations among her fellow trainees about the upcoming challenge. Some were nervous, others were trying to project confidence, and a few were making predictions about who would succeed and who would fail. "I bet Martinez chokes under pressure," Marcus said to a small group gathered near the water station. "She's been lucky so far, but when things get real, we'll see what she's really made of." His words stung, but Sarah had learned long ago not to let others' opinions affect her performance. Her father had taught her that doubt was the enemy of accuracy, and she had trained herself to block out negative thoughts and focus only on the task at hand. As the trainees prepared for the final exercise, Sergeant Williams gathered them for a brief instruction session. He explained the rules and expectations, emphasizing the importance of maintaining composure under stress. "This exercise will push you to your limits," he told them. "Remember your training, trust your abilities, and don't let the chaos around you break your concentration. Good luck." The final exercise area was set up to simulate an urban combat environment with obstacles, smoke machines, and speakers that would play various distracting sounds. The targets were positioned at different elevations and distances, some partially concealed behind barriers. Sarah took her assigned position and began her preparation routine. She checked her equipment one final time, noted the environmental conditions, and mentally rehearsed her shooting sequence. Around her, the other trainees were doing the same, each dealing with their own pre-exercise nerves in different ways. As the exercise began, the training area erupted in controlled chaos. Smoke filled the air, speakers blared with recorded gunfire and explosions, and instructors moved through the area creating additional distractions. In the middle of all this confusion, the trainees had to locate and engage multiple targets with precision accuracy. Sarah's first target was partially hidden behind a concrete barrier at 900 yards. Through her scope, she could barely make out the edge of the target through the drifting smoke. She waited for a brief clearing in the smoke, made her calculations, and took her shot. Hit. The second target was more challenging, positioned at an elevated angle and partially obscured by shadows. The noise around her was intense, but Sarah had learned to filter out distractions and focus only on her breathing and sight picture. Another successful shot. As she moved to engage her third target, Sarah became aware that several trainees around her were struggling with the exercise. She could hear frustrated voices and the sounds of missed shots. The pressure was getting to some of them, exactly as the instructors had intended. Her final target was at the maximum distance and elevation, requiring her to make complex calculations while dealing with swirling wind conditions created by the smoke machines. This was the shot that would determine her final score for the entire exercise. Sarah took extra time with this shot, waiting for the optimal conditions and double-checking her calculations. The noise and chaos around her seemed to fade away as she entered what she called her zone, a state of complete focus where only she and the target existed. When she finally took the shot, she knew immediately that it was good. The spotter's confirmation came a moment later, followed by cheers from some of her fellow trainees who had been watching her performance. As the exercise concluded and the smoke began to clear, Sarah felt a sense of satisfaction with her performance. She had successfully hit all her targets under the most challenging conditions the training program had to offer, but she also knew that her success would not be welcomed by everyone. Marcus had struggled significantly with the final exercise, managing to hit only 2 of his 4 assigned targets. His frustration was evident as he packed up his equipment, and Sarah could see him glancing in her direction with obvious resentment. The results of the day's exercises would be announced the following morning, along with the final rankings for the entire training program. For now, the trainees were dismissed to clean their equipment and prepare for the evening meal. As Sarah carefully cleaned and stored her rifle, she reflected on the day's events. She had performed well, but she knew that her quiet success was creating tension within the group. Some of her fellow trainees seemed to view her achievements as a threat to their own chances of success. That evening, as the trainees gathered in the mess hall for dinner, the atmosphere was noticeably tense. Conversations were subdued, and many of the trainees seemed lost in thought about their performance and what the results might mean for their military careers. Sarah chose to sit alone, as had become her habit. She preferred the quiet time to process the day's events and mentally prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. But solitude was not always possible in the close quarters of military training, and she soon found herself the subject of unwanted attention. Marcus approached Sarah's table with deliberate steps, his meal tray in hand, and his expression showing barely controlled frustration. Behind him followed Jake and 2 other trainees, creating what felt like an unwelcome confrontation in the middle of the dining hall. "Mind if we join you, Martinez?" Marcus asked, though his tone suggested it wasn't really a question. Without waiting for an answer, he sat down across from her, followed by the others. Sarah looked up from her meal, immediately sensing the tension in the air. "Sure," she replied quietly, though every instinct told her this conversation would not be pleasant. "Hell of a day today, wasn't it?" Marcus began, his voice carrying a sarcastic edge. "Some people seem to have all the luck with their shots." Sarah continued eating, choosing not to respond to the obvious provocation. She had learned from her father that sometimes the best response was no response at all, especially when dealing with people who were looking for a fight. "You know what I find interesting?" Marcus continued, his voice getting slightly louder. "How some folks can perform so well in training, but when it comes to real combat situations, they completely fall apart." Jake nodded in agreement, adding, "Yeah, training is one thing, but actual combat is completely different. The pressure, the chaos, the lives depending on you. That's when you find out who has what it takes." Sarah finally looked up, meeting Marcus's gaze directly. "I guess we'll find out when the time comes," she said simply. "Will we?" Marcus leaned forward slightly. "I mean, how do we know you won't freeze up when bullets start flying for real? When there are lives on the line instead of just paper targets?" The challenge in his voice was unmistakable now, and other trainees nearby were beginning to notice the confrontation. The dining hall, which had been filled with quiet conversations, was gradually becoming more silent as people turned their attention to the developing situation. Sarah put down her fork and looked directly at Marcus. "I can't prove anything to you with words," she said calmly, "but my performance speaks for itself." "Performance in a controlled environment," Marcus shot back, "with instructors watching and safety protocols in place. That's not the real world, sweetheart." The condescending term hit Sarah like a slap, but she maintained her composure. Years of dealing with skeptical classmates and dismissive comments had taught her to control her emotions, even when her anger was justified. "Maybe you should focus on your own performance instead of worrying about mine," Sarah replied, her voice remaining steady despite the insult. Marcus's face reddened slightly. "My performance? I've been shooting since I was 5 years old. My grandfather served in World War II, my father in Vietnam, and my brother is currently deployed overseas. Military service runs in my blood." "That's impressive," Sarah acknowledged. "But genetics don't squeeze the trigger. Training and skill do." The response clearly frustrated Marcus further. He had expected Sarah to back down or become defensive, but her calm confidence was having the opposite effect of what he intended. "You think you're better than the rest of us, don't you?" he accused. "Sitting alone all the time, acting like you're too good to socialize with your fellow soldiers." Sarah shook her head. "I don't think I'm better than anyone. I just prefer to focus on my training rather than spend time in conversations that don't help me improve." "Conversations like this one?" Jake interjected with a smirk. "Exactly like this one," Sarah replied without hesitation. The exchange was interrupted by the arrival of Sergeant Williams, who had been observing the situation from across the dining hall. His presence immediately changed the dynamics of the conversation, and the surrounding trainees quickly returned to their own meals and discussions. "Everything all right over here?" Sergeant Williams asked, his experienced eyes taking in the tense body language and uncomfortable expressions around the table. "Just having a friendly discussion about training, Sergeant," Marcus replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sergeant Williams looked at each person at the table before responding. "Good, because tomorrow we start the final phase of the program, and I need everyone focused on their own performance rather than worrying about anyone else's." The message was clear, and Marcus nodded reluctantly. "Of course, Sergeant, just comparing notes and experiences." "Excellent. Martinez, when you're finished with your meal, I'd like to see you in my office." Sarah nodded, wondering what the sergeant wanted to discuss. As Sergeant Williams walked away, the tension at the table remained thick, but the direct confrontation was effectively over. "Looks like teacher's pet has been summoned," Marcus muttered under his breath, loud enough for the table to hear but quiet enough to avoid the sergeant's attention. Sarah finished her meal in silence, gathered her tray, and left the table without another word. As she walked away, she could hear whispered comments behind her, but she refused to look back or acknowledge them. 20 minutes later, Sarah knocked on Sergeant Williams's office door and was invited to enter. The office was spartanly decorated with military awards on the walls and a neat desk containing only essential paperwork. "Sit down, Martinez," Sergeant Williams said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "How are you feeling about your performance so far?" "Good, Sergeant. I feel like I'm improving every day and learning a lot from the training." Sergeant Williams nodded. "Your scores certainly reflect that. You're currently ranked first in the program, with consistent high performance across all exercises." Sarah felt a mix of pride and apprehension at this news. Being ranked first was gratifying, but she knew it would likely increase the tension with some of her fellow trainees. "However," the sergeant continued, "I'm concerned about something else. Have you noticed any issues with team cohesion or interpersonal conflicts within your training group?" Sarah hesitated, uncertain about how much to share. Military protocol emphasized unit cohesion and loyalty, but she also valued honesty. "There have been some tensions, Sergeant. Some of the other trainees seem to resent my performance." "Such as?" "Comments about whether I can handle real combat situations, suggestions that my success is just luck, that sort of thing." Sergeant Williams leaned back in his chair, considering her words. "And how are you handling these situations?" "I try to ignore them and focus on my training. I figure my performance will speak for itself." "That's a mature approach, but it may not be sufficient." The sergeant paused, choosing his words carefully. "In real military operations, you'll need to work closely with your fellow soldiers. Trust and mutual respect are essential for mission success and survival." Sarah nodded, understanding the implication. "What would you suggest, Sergeant?" "I'm not asking you to change who you are or compromise your standards, but consider ways to build relationships with your fellow trainees. Sometimes a little effort in that direction can prevent bigger problems down the road." "I'll think about that, Sergeant." "Good. There's something else I want to discuss with you." Sergeant Williams pulled a folder from his desk drawer. "Based on your performance, you're being considered for an advanced training opportunity after you complete this program." Sarah's eyes widened with interest. "What kind of opportunity?" "Specialized sniper school with potential assignment to elite units. It's highly competitive and only the top performers are invited to apply." The news was both exciting and daunting. Such an opportunity could define her entire military career, but it would also mean even higher expectations and greater challenges. "When would I need to decide?" "Not until you complete this program successfully. But I wanted you to know so you can start thinking about whether it's something you'd want to pursue." Sarah thanked the sergeant and left his office with her mind racing. The conversation had given her a lot to think about, both regarding her relationships with fellow trainees and her future career possibilities. The next morning brought the beginning of the final phase of the training program. This phase would last 2 weeks and include the most challenging exercises yet, culminating in a comprehensive evaluation that would determine final rankings and program completion. The day started with a briefing about the week's activities, which would include night shooting exercises, extreme weather training, and simulated combat scenarios. The pressure was evident on every trainee's face as they realized how much their future careers depended on their performance during these final weeks. After the briefing, the trainees were divided into pairs for buddy system exercises. Sarah found herself paired with Lisa Chen, a quiet and skilled marksman from California who had consistently performed well throughout the program. "Looks like we're partners," Lisa said with a friendly smile. "I've been hoping to work with you. Your shooting is incredible." Sarah was surprised by the genuine compliment. Most of her interactions with fellow trainees had been neutral at best, and often tense like the previous evening's encounter with Marcus. "Thanks. I've noticed your shooting too. You're really consistent under pressure." As they prepared for their first paired exercise, Sarah found herself appreciating the opportunity to work closely with someone who seemed supportive rather than competitive. Lisa asked thoughtful questions about Sarah's techniques and shared some of her own insights about wind reading and target acquisition. The paired exercise involved one person shooting while the other acted as spotter, then switching roles. Effective communication between partners was essential for success, and Sarah quickly discovered that Lisa was an excellent spotter with keen observational skills. "Target at 2 o'clock, 850 yards, partial concealment behind the rock formation," Lisa called out through her spotting scope. Sarah adjusted her position and scope, locating the target and making her calculations. "I see it. Wind is coming from the left at about 8 miles per hour. "Confirmed. You're good to go when ready." The shot was clean and accurate, earning praise from the supervising instructor. When they switched roles, Sarah found that spotting for Lisa was equally satisfying. The partnership felt natural and effective. During the lunch break, Lisa and Sarah sat together, continuing their discussion about shooting techniques and sharing stories about their backgrounds. Sarah learned that Lisa had grown up on a ranch and learned to shoot while hunting with her uncle, who had been a Marine sniper during the Gulf War. "He always told me that the mental game was more important than the physical skills," Lisa explained. "He said that doubt and fear were the biggest enemies of accuracy." "My father said something similar," Sarah replied. "He taught me that confidence comes from preparation and practice, not from what other people think." Their conversation was interrupted by Marcus and his group sitting down at a nearby table. The proximity was clearly intentional, and Sarah could see Marcus glancing over at them with obvious interest in their discussion. "Must be nice to have such an easy partner for the exercises," Marcus commented loudly enough for them to hear. "Some of us got stuck with people who actually challenge us." Lisa looked confused by the comment, but Sarah understood immediately that it was another attempt to undermine her confidence and create conflict. "Everyone here is challenging in their own way," Sarah replied calmly. "That's why we're all in this program." "Are we?" Marcus shot back. "Because some people seem to breeze through everything without any real effort." Lisa finally understood what was happening and decided to speak up. "If you think Sarah doesn't put in effort, you haven't been paying attention. She practices more than anyone else here." "Practice is one thing," Jake added, supporting Marcus, "but natural ability only goes so far when the stakes get real." "I guess we'll find out during the final evaluations," Lisa replied firmly, showing unexpected assertiveness in defending her partner. The exchange ended there, but Sarah could see that the conflict was escalating beyond just her relationship with Marcus. Now other trainees were being drawn into the tension, which could affect the entire group's performance and cohesion. That afternoon's exercise was more challenging than anything they had faced before. Working in pairs, they had to navigate through a complex obstacle course while engaging multiple targets at varying distances. Communication, teamwork, and individual skill were all essential for success. Sarah and Lisa moved through the course with remarkable coordination, their partnership proving to be highly effective under pressure. They completed the exercise with one of the best times and accuracy scores of the day. As they finished and waited for other pairs to complete their runs, Sarah noticed Marcus watching them intently. His own performance with his partner had been adequate, but not exceptional, and his frustration was becoming more evident with each exercise. The final week of training arrived with an intensity that could be felt throughout the entire facility. Every trainee understood that these last 7 days would determine not only their graduation from the program, but also their future military assignments and career prospects. The pressure was enormous, and it showed in everyone's behavior. Sarah had been performing consistently at the top of the class, but she knew that final week evaluations could change everything. One bad day, one missed shot under pressure could drop her ranking significantly. She maintained her quiet focus, but internally she felt the weight of expectations and opportunities. The week began with the most challenging exercise yet, a 3-day field training simulation that would test every skill they had learned. Trainees would be divided into small teams and dropped into a remote area of the desert, where they would have to complete a series of missions while dealing with realistic combat conditions. During the team selection process, Sarah found herself grouped with Lisa, Marcus, and 2 other trainees, David Rodriguez, a solid performer from New Mexico, and Jennifer Walsh, who had struggled initially but had shown significant improvement throughout the program. The irony of being on the same team as Marcus was not lost on any of them. Sergeant Williams had clearly made this decision intentionally, perhaps to force them to work through their conflicts in a high-pressure environment. "Looks like we're all together," Marcus said as the team gathered to review their mission briefing. His tone was neutral, but Sarah could sense the underlying tension. The mission was complex. They had to infiltrate a simulated enemy position, gather intelligence, and eliminate specific high-value targets at ranges up to 1,000 yards. Success would require careful planning, flawless execution, and complete team coordination. As the team leader, Marcus began organizing their approach. Despite their personal conflicts, Sarah had to admit that he had strong leadership skills and tactical knowledge. His military family background had given him excellent training in mission planning and team coordination. Rodriguez and Walsh will handle perimeter security and communications, Marcus explained, pointing to positions on their tactical map. Chen will be primary spotter for long-range engagements. Martinez, you'll be our designated marksman for the precision shots. Sarah nodded, understanding her role, but also recognizing the pressure it placed on her. The success or failure of key mission objectives would depend heavily on her shooting accuracy under combat conditions. "What's the backup plan if I miss a critical shot?" Sarah asked, wanting to ensure the team had contingency plans. Marcus looked at her with surprise, perhaps expecting her to show overconfidence rather than thoughtful preparation. "Chen is qualified for long-range shooting if needed, but based on your training scores, you shouldn't miss." The comment carried both trust and challenge, acknowledging her abilities while setting clear expectations for performance. They spent the rest of the day planning their approach, studying maps, checking equipment, and rehearsing communication procedures. Sarah noticed that Marcus was professional and thorough in his planning, setting aside personal conflicts to focus on mission success. That evening, as they prepared their gear for the early morning deployment, Lisa approached Sarah privately. "Are you feeling okay about tomorrow?" Lisa asked quietly. "Nervous, but ready," Sarah admitted. "This is what we've been training for." "Marcus has been different today, more professional, less antagonistic. Maybe the pressure is making him focus on what's really important." Sarah hoped Lisa was right, but she remained cautious about trusting the change in Marcus's behavior. The next morning, their team was transported by helicopter to a remote drop-off point in the desert mountains. The terrain was rugged and challenging, with limited cover and extreme temperature variations between day and night. Their first objective was to reach an observation point overlooking the simulated enemy compound without being detected by roving patrols. The movement required careful timing and coordination, especially since they were carrying heavy equipment, including Sarah's precision rifle and Lisa's spotting scope. The team moved through the desert terrain with impressive skill, using natural cover and terrain features to avoid detection. Marcus's leadership was effective, and even Sarah had to acknowledge his tactical expertise. After 6 hours of careful movement, they reached their designated observation point on a ridge overlooking the target area. From this position, they could see the entire compound and begin planning their specific attack approach. Through her scope, Sarah studied the target area carefully. The distances to various key positions ranged from 600 to 950 yards, all within her capabilities but requiring precise calculations for wind and elevation. "Primary target is the command post at bearing 045, range 850 yards, Lisa whispered through her spotting scope. Sarah found the target and noted the environmental conditions. Wind was variable, with gusts coming from different directions as air currents moved through the mountain valleys. "I see it. Wind is tricky here, multiple directions and speeds depending on elevation." "Agreed. We'll need to time the shots carefully." The mission plan called for simultaneous elimination of 3 high-value targets, followed by extraction under simulated enemy fire. Sarah would be responsible for 2 of the 3 shots, with David taking the third using a standard rifle at shorter range. As afternoon turned to evening, the team prepared for their attack window. The plan required precise timing, with all shots fired within a 30-second window to prevent the enemy from responding effectively. "Final check," Marcus whispered into his radio. "All positions ready?" Confirmations came back from each team member. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as the moment of truth approached. Everything they had trained for came down to the next few minutes. "Wind conditions?" Lisa asked quietly. Sarah checked her wind meter and observed the flags in the target area. Variable, but manageable. Primary target has a left-to-right wind at about 6 miles per hour. Roger. You're good to go on my mark. Sarah settled into her shooting position, controlling her breathing and clearing her mind of all distractions. Through her scope, she could see the target clearly, a mannequin positioned to simulate an enemy commander. 5 seconds, Lisa announced. Sarah made her final adjustments and placed her finger on the trigger, applying steady pressure without firing. Execute! Her rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the valley. Through the scope, she saw the target fall, a direct hit. Without hesitation, she shifted to her second target and fired again, another hit. David's shot rang out simultaneously with her second shot, and all 3 primary targets were down within the required time window. Excellent shooting, Marcus said, genuine admiration in his voice. All targets eliminated. Begin extraction procedures. The extraction phase of the mission tested their ability to move quickly while under simulated enemy fire. Instructors hidden throughout the area used blank ammunition and smoke grenades to create realistic combat stress as the team moved toward their pickup point. Sarah found herself moving through the terrain with surprising ease, her equipment no longer feeling heavy despite the challenging conditions. The successful completion of her shooting assignments had given her confidence that carried over into all aspects of the mission. As they reached the extraction point, Marcus called for a final team check. Everyone was accounted for, all objectives had been completed successfully, and no one had been wounded during the simulated combat. Outstanding work, everyone, Marcus said as they waited for their pickup helicopter. This was textbook execution. For the first time since training began, Sarah heard genuine respect in Marcus's voice when he spoke to her. The successful mission had apparently changed his perspective on her abilities and reliability under pressure. The helicopter ride back to base was filled with excited conversation as team members reviewed their performance and shared observations about what had worked well. Even Marcus seemed more relaxed, his earlier antagonism replaced by professional respect. That evening, during the mission debrief with Sergeant Williams and other instructors, their team received high praise for their execution and teamwork. Sarah's shooting performance was specifically noted as exceptional under challenging conditions. Martinez demonstrated exactly the kind of precision and reliability we expect from our graduate snipers, Sergeant Williams told the group. Under variable wind conditions and time pressure, she delivered flawless accuracy on both assigned targets. After the debrief, as the team members prepared to return to their barracks, Marcus approached Sarah privately. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "I've been a complete ass, and there's no excuse for it." Sarah was surprised by his directness and apparent sincerity. "What changed your mind?" "Watching you perform under real pressure. Not training pressure, but mission pressure, where failure would have affected the whole team." Marcus paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I was wrong about you. You're not just a good shot. You're a soldier I'd trust to watch my back in combat." The admission clearly wasn't easy for him, but Sarah appreciated his honesty. "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot. I let my ego and frustration get in the way of seeing what was right in front of me," Marcus continued. "You earned your place here through skill and hard work, and I should have respected that from the beginning." They talked for another few minutes, clearing the air about their conflicts and establishing a foundation for mutual respect. Sarah realized that Marcus's antagonism had come from his own insecurities and fear of failure, not from any real assessment of her abilities. The final 2 days of training included individual evaluations and comprehensive testing of all skills learned throughout the program. Sarah approached these tests with new confidence, not just in her shooting abilities, but in her place within the military community. Her final shooting test was conducted under the most challenging conditions yet, extreme range targets in changing weather with multiple distracting elements. As she took her position for the final series of shots, Sarah felt completely prepared and focused. The first target was at maximum range, 1,200 yards, with a crosswind that required significant adjustment. She took her time, made careful calculations, and fired. Direct hit. The second target was partially concealed and required her to wait for optimal conditions. Again, patience and precision resulted in a successful shot. As she prepared for her final shot, the most challenging of the entire program, Sarah was vaguely aware of other trainees and instructors watching. But their presence didn't distract her. Instead, it reminded her of how far she had come and what she had achieved. The final target required not just accuracy, but perfect timing. It was a moving target at extreme range, visible only briefly through a gap in artificial obstacles. She would have just one chance to make the shot. Sarah tracked the target's movement pattern, calculated the timing, and waited for the optimal moment. When it came, she fired without hesitation. The silence that followed seemed to last forever before the spotter's confirmation came through the radio. Target eliminated. Outstanding shot. As Sarah stood up from her shooting position, she realized that several people were applauding. Marcus was among them, clapping enthusiastically and smiling with genuine appreciation for her performance. The graduation ceremony took place 3 days later. Sarah finished the program ranked first overall, with scores that impressed even the veteran instructors. But more importantly, she had earned the respect of her fellow trainees and proved to herself that she belonged in this elite community. During the ceremony, as she received recognition for her outstanding performance, Sarah reflected on everything that had happened. The challenges, the conflicts, the pressure, and ultimately the success had all contributed to her growth as both a soldier and a person. Marcus approached her after the ceremony, now wearing the same graduation insignia that she wore. "So, what's next for you?" he asked. "Advanced sniper school if I'm accepted," Sarah replied. "Sergeant Williams recommended me for the program." "That's incredible. You've earned it." Marcus extended his hand. "I'm proud to have trained alongside you." As they shook hands, Sarah realized that her journey was just beginning. The skills and confidence she had developed during this training would serve her well in whatever challenges lay ahead. Later that evening, as she packed her belongings and prepared to leave the training facility, Sarah received a phone call from her father. "How did it go, sweetheart?" he asked. "Better than I hoped," Sarah replied, unable to keep the pride out of her voice. "I finished first in the program, and I've been recommended for advanced training." "I'm not surprised. You've always had the dedication and skill to succeed at whatever you set your mind to." "Thanks, Dad. Your training and support made all the difference." As she ended the call and continued packing, Sarah thought about the comment that Marcus had made weeks earlier, questioning whether she could handle real combat pressure. At the time, it had stung and created doubt in her mind. Now, after proving herself under the most challenging conditions the training program could provide, she felt ready for whatever came next. She had demonstrated not just shooting accuracy, but leadership, teamwork, and grace under pressure. The quiet girl who had been tweaking her weapons while others boasted and argued had become a confident, capable soldier ready to serve her country at the highest level. She had let her performance speak for itself, and the message had been heard loud and clear by everyone who mattered. As Sarah prepared for sleep on her final night at the training facility, she smiled at the memory of that first confrontation with Marcus. His challenge, "Let's see you nail this one," had been meant to undermine her confidence and expose her weaknesses. Instead, it had become the catalyst for her to prove not just her shooting skills, but her character and determination. She had nailed it in ways that even she hadn't expected when the challenge was first thrown down. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight, Sarah Martinez could rest knowing that she had earned her place among the elite, one perfectly placed shot at a time.